Minimum wage jobs demand physical and mental stress, which causes the pay to generate not enough income for housing or food in America. Barbara Ehrenreich is a writer who composed the book Nickel and Dimed. She goes undercover to observe people making minimum wage to survive. She travels to Florida, Maine, and Minnesota, searching for jobs that make minimum wage. Her final goal is to find a place to live, in which she can afford when only making the lowest wage guaranteed by law in each place she lives in. She finds it difficult to find a place to settle and a job that makes enough to survive on minimum wage. Sometimes she needed to find two jobs in order to survive. As she worked each job, she found many social issues she was not equipped to handle. She experienced many barriers that hadn't been part of her life in the past. She wasn't accustomed to working and living among the poor, finding that she needed new skills to manage life among her neighbors and workplaces. There was a certain pecking order in each workplace. Discovering she needed to learn the skills to navigate these complicated relationships on the job, she found minimum wage jobs as a server at two unique restaurants, as a maid cleaning houses, and as a dietary assistant at a nursing home, among some other ones. Ehrenreich learned the job skills, however, she was amazed that each low-wage job she took demanded huge amounts of endurance, memory, quick thinking, and learning. We will look at how sociology helps us understand this text, how the text helps us understand the social world, whether individuals can help us make a difference, and how the text relates to our faith.
Okay, so to address the first question about how what we've learned in sociology helps us understand the text, I found three main things that we learned that really helps. So the concept of socialization, and then with that, the looking glass self theory about socialization, and then also the social script that we studied. So to begin, she said that socialization was the hardest part of what she had to do. It wasn't even working the job. It was just learning how to fit in with the new social world that she was part of. And so socialization is defined as the process by which people learn the attitudes, norms, values, and actions appropriate to members of a social world. So for example, for her job in Florida, the first day she worked at the diner, the girls all ignored her and no one really talked to her. The second day she arrived, she found out that was because people rarely stayed after a second day. So that was the first major step in her socialization process. And she said it wasn't an easy transition, but she felt powerfully vindicated as a survivor. Another part of the socialization process at the job was smoking during quick breaks. All the women were really shocked to find out that she didn't smoke. They couldn't believe that she was able to survive without it. So that was another part of it. And then another major part of the diner job socialization process was deviance, especially from expected norms from the bosses and their managers. So she would end up giving people extra rolls or extra portions of butter or more time sitting around not paying for food. And this was just an expected part of deviance that made her part of her new social world. And then, so to continue with the looking glass of self, how the theory works is first you imagine how you appear to others. And so for her job in Maine, she had to scrub floors on her hands and knees. And so she imagined how she appeared to the woman she was working for, was just kind of really lower class and not really worthy of being really respected like other people. That was just because of the position that she was in. And then another part of that is you imagine how others perceive you. So again, she just imagined how the woman didn't perceive her as part of the good higher up class. And then you develop feelings based upon this is the last part of that. And so she kind of went into the job feeling like she was like really on top of the world and she was superwoman. But after that day, she said she felt really low and like she didn't belong there. And then the last part of this is the social script. And this is a really big part of the job she worked, especially at the diners. And the trouble she had was that she was spending too much time chatting with customers, and this was really slowing down, and because it added to sequential demands. So she would bring them ketchup or something or sauce, and then they would want water after that, or she would bring them something else, and they would just keep asking for stuff. And so her manager asked her to stop doing that as part of the script. And she says customers are in fact the major obstacle to smooth transformation of information into food and food into money. They're in short the enemy. And so she began to see the customers as the enemy. And so this kind of lends itself to the pattern think. She saw the customers as the enemy. And then that led to pattern do. She would treat the customers really harshly, or she just kind of ignored their needs. And that led to pattern have, which was customers treated her a certain way and how they interacted.
Yeah, so I found that individuals are both freed but mostly constrained. A common theme that I understood from the text was dependency. I found this to be extremely constraining. In the text, minimum wage workers are dependent on those who depend on them. So while customers and the clients depend on the workers' service, the workers often depend on the customers to earn living wages in order to survive and have food and have a place to live. Another way of dependency was was shown through the frequent theme of women workers depending on a man's income, which determined her living situation. The ways a woman often was living and the environment that she was living in often depended on the men's wage. And so she was very dependent on not only her own wage, which would not have given her enough opportunity for food and living space. So dependency is also shown where someone works. So where someone works depends on the schedules of those who they rely on to drive them to and from work. So on their own routes, they can drop off these minimum wage workers, and so really they don't have much of a choice of where they get to work. So because of this, conditions of living is often constrained by those who live around them and who live around us as individuals. The lower wage class is constrained because, as one worker put it, you give and you give. And in the text, it was reality that the workers never really received what they deserved. As much as they gave every day, very little of it was really returned. So it seemed that the more dependent individuals were, the more constrained they seemed to be in the social world. But in other ways, individuals may be free, especially in the working poor, as Ehrenreich referred to them. She said that the working poor were the major philanthropists of our society. So in this way, who is referred to as the working poor has real power and control of the society. So in this sense, they are free to alter the society as we know it today.
After reading Nickel and Dimed, I would argue that it is very possible for individuals to make a difference. Ehrenreich exemplifies this in both small and large ways multiple times throughout the text. First, there are numerous examples where Ehrenreich positively impacts the lives of her coworkers. Specifically, on page 49 of the text, Ehrenreich quits her job in Florida and in the process gives the key to trailer 46 to Gail and arranged for the deposit to be transferred to her. If you recall, Gail was a coworker of Ehrenreich at Hearthside. As noted throughout the book several times, paying rent is one of the hardest aspects of surviving the minimum wage workers. Gail had previously been living out of her truck, which was made difficult with the heat of Florida. By giving Gail the opportunity to live in the trailer, Ehrenreich provided her with a head start on rent and allowed her to save on other expenses. More importantly, she was provided with a place to live instead of her truck. While this may seem like a minor detail in the overarching theme of the story, it represents perfectly how an individual can make a difference in a small way. Next, we can examine how Ehrenreich makes a difference in the bigger picture. This quote shows one of the biggest ways of how she was able to make a difference. It says, "Again and again, in that first year or two after publication, people came up to me and opened with the words, 'I never thought,' or 'I hadn't realized.'" Clearly, from this quote, there were many people who were unaware of the difficulties presented by living on the wages of the unskilled. However, through her hard work and sacrifice, Ehrenreich was able to illustrate these difficulties to all of the readers of Nickel and Dimed. By bringing these struggles out into the daylight, the issues discussed throughout the book could be addressed. However, without the hard work of one singular individual, this would not be possible. Because of these specific examples, along with a multitude of others from the text, I believe that individuals can definitely make a difference.
I believe that this book should cause anyone, especially Christians, to reflect on who they are in the world. When Erin Reich, who claims to be an atheist, attends a tent revival, she says it will be the perfect entertainment. In the author's times there, she critiques the event, which I found to be insightful, coming from someone who is an atheist, who knows about who Jesus is and his teachings. She notes that the 10 people that were on stage were all men, and the crowd was not very diverse, highlighting some major faults in the modern Christian church. Ehrenreich then says Christ crucified rules, and that it may be the true business of modern Christianity is to crucify him again and again so that he can never get a word out of his mouth. Now, this may seem a little offensive to some, but she's implying that these people speaking at the tent revival were neglecting to mention the teachings of Jesus. Ehrenreich writes that the preacher should have read the Sermon on the Mount. She then explains it as Jesus' rousing commentary on income inequality and the need for a hike in the minimum wage. Yet they were only talking about the crucified Jesus. In the afterword of this book, the way the author mentions this experience seems quite controversial to some Christians who read the book. As a defense, Ehrenreich talks about her admiration for Jesus in the book of Matthew, which causes her to say that she holds Christians to a high standard. She considers the Christians she met in Florida to be visible Christians, wearing Christian-themed t-shirts or what would Jesus do bracelets, who tipped so poorly in Florida. I believe that this is a problem in Christian culture. We oftentimes reflect on what would Jesus do, yet because of our sin, we fail to live it out. This was something that disappointed the author because, in her words, she holds Christians in a higher standard. I believe that as Christians, we need to be generous and kind to the people, not just on our mission trips, but in our daily life. For those who can afford to tip, be generous because the extra money is a blessing towards others. As a church, we need to not lose sight of Jesus' teachings. Overall, as Christians, we should read this book not only to recognize the oppressed, but should feel encouraged to help others who are struggling in life, whether it be financially or situationally.
Ehrenreich gives a voice to America's mass of low-wage workers who push the American economy without ever being recognized, using emotion, imagery, and economic research. Ehrenreich, although being an educated member of the upper middle class, she successfully found that the working poor are the real drivers of the economy. Minimum wage jobs demand physical and mental stress, which generates too little income for housing or food in America. She disputes the idea that the working poor in America are not ambitious or hardworking. In fact, she opposes the idea that low-wage occupations call for incompetent or unskilled work, and uses poverty humanization to add significance to the need for social and economic change. This book achieves its end purpose, which is to get people to care about the problems of the large mass of the working class in America.